Right, so today I thought we'd have a little bit of a play at doing a rusty tag. This is one of the ones I've already done, and it gives a lovely rusty texture. I've got some of my rusty kitchen roll paper. It started out like this, just off a roll of paper that you'd use in the kitchen. And it's on a previous video. I'll put the link in the description. But I've got all these various little bits of sort of leftover tatty bits. There's varying amounts of rusting powder on them. This is a nice bit here. Nice lot of rusting powder on there. I tend to keep the little scraps because you can use them in all sorts of projects. The kitchen roll is always either 2 or 3 ply, depending on how expensive it is. Once it's been rusted and everything, I separate it into separate sheets. It's quite easy. It tends to come apart quite easily once you've treated it with the rusting powder. We're going to be using this, which is what we used to create that rusty kitchen roll, which is rusting powder by PaperArtsy. Wonderful stuff. I've also got an MDF tag. These are from Samantha K Designs. She's on the internet. If you just look up Samantha K Designs and look into the MDF section, and these are tags, MDF tags. There's different sizes that she sells. Absolutely brilliant. They're a reasonable thickness of MDF. I've got this little bottle which is just white vinegar. It's got a little bit of a colour to it because there was a bit of rusty vinegar in the bottom, but it's basically white vinegar. It starts off white. It just happened to have a bit of rust in the bottom of that bottle. It's a flip top one. It's one of those that you get from a pharmacy for putting travel cosmetics in, and it flips up and then the vinegar will come out of there. I don't use spray bottles because usually there's an element somewhere in the mechanism that's metal. Somewhere in here there'll be some metal and it would corrode with the vinegar. So that's why I use the flip top one instead. So I've got my MDF tag. I've got some DecoArt decoupage napkin adhesive. This is the very end of this jar, so it'll probably get used up with this. And I use this just to put the rusty tissue as the first layer on my tag. So it will soak in a little bit because the MDF isn't sealed. You could seal it and then adhere your tissue, but I just put a reasonable amount on and then it does stick. Make sure you go right to the edges because it's the edges that will come up if you don't have enough adhesive on. So one bit, we'll find a nice rusty bit. We'll go with this to set off with. You can do as many layers as you want. The one I've just showed you, I did 2 layers, but really basically do as many as you want. Now I actually like some wrinkles in my tissue because it gives extra texture, so don't worry about having wrinkles in your kitchen roll. So that's the first layer. Now I'll be a bit more selective for the top layer. I like that bit. So look, that's got a nice rusty bit as well. That has. Let's see what else. That's got a nice bit. I think that might about do it. So I'll just layer these on again. I've got a bit more adhesive. I don't particularly let it dry in between the layers because you don't need to. And as you can see, once you layer one on top of the other, it sort of blends in And I go to the edges and overhang slightly because you'll sand that down later. So I'll have a bit more up here. I think that's got a bit too. And just tear it. If you don't want to cover this area up, just tear it. Whoops, not enough adhesive. It's probably dried in between because it's quite fast at drying this. I don't want a distinct line there, so I'm going to just go over. Don't worry if it tears like that, you can just patch it in. Once you've got all your little bits glued on, this will take a little bit more glue because there's a lot of rusting powder on that area. So I tend to sometimes, I'll just dab rather than brush. But I don't mind if it's got a broken up sort of look to it. What else do we want? A bit more colour. I'll have this bit. A bit more colour there. At this bottom edge here. And you can make it as rusty looking as you like. You could have it quite pale if you want. Because you are going to add more layers on the top. The other one that I showed you had quite a pale area of tissue. But this one I thought I'll just go a bit darker. I'll have this bit here, I think. And it tears ever so easily. So you can just tear and rip away. I don't bother about covering up the hole because I'll just do that and it'll punch through. And if you work the adhesive in it, it sort of goes into the hole. You might end up with some paler areas. Don't worry about that. You'll probably cover it all up when you've got your rusting powder on it. Right, so I think we're about there. I think that's the look I'm going for. Don't forget to put your brush straight in water. So I think that is not quite glued down, so I might add a little bit of gel medium just under there. But what I am going to do, let me just get rid of this tissue out of the way for the moment. I'll just put a little bit of gel medium under there, just so it sticks. Let me find a brush. So I don't want it to come up, unless I'll end up with an odd looking area. Stuff sticks to everything. Alright, let's see. I think it was this bit that wasn't sticking. Yeah, that bit. So we'll go on to there. If you just push it, if it isn't stuck, it'll raise up like that. That's it. It isn't stuck, so we'll just get that up and put a gel medium underneath it a little bit. It's because it's got an awful lot of rusting powder on it. So there we are. Just put a little bit so it isn't as obvious if it does have a little bit less sheen or whatever once it's dry. I tend to do the same thing to all areas of the tag, otherwise you might get an area that's obviously different. Alright, so I think we're about there. Put that straight in the jar. So what I'll do is I will dry that and then we'll put some of this crackled texture paste by Aladine, Izink. It's designed by Seth Apter. I'm getting quite low on it. There's not very much left in there, but you could use any crackle paste that works well. But once it's dried, we'll sand the edges off, and then we'll come back and apply that and the next layer, which will be rusting powder. So we'll come back in a moment. Right, so we're back. Our tag is nearly dry. This little bit, this area where the gel medium's on, it's not quite dry, but it'll dry soon. I've sanded the majority of the edges with this sanding block. Basically, I just gently rub it along the edges, and the tissue comes off. Very easy. Gives a nice smooth edge. I use the edge just to go into any crevices like that, just getting the edge off. That's it. So that's our first base layer. You won't see much of that, but it just gives a nice base, and it gives more depth if you've got a little bit of something underneath it. We're going to apply this crackled texture paste next, which, as I say, is from Aladine. It's their Izink range, and it was designed by Seth Apter. So always keep this cap area clean. Don't get any of the paste on there and put the lid back on, or it'll stick. Always clean that to make sure it's clean. I tend to put a little bit on my craft mat. As I say, I tend to just do it with my finger. Wipe it off, put the cap straight back on. I've got an old spatula, and I just pick up a fair bit in one go. I think I'm going to go sort of here, up the sides, along the bottom a little bit. I don't particularly want it round the edges, but I'm not bothered. A little bit here, and the edges. I don't particularly want palette or spatula marks in it, but I want a little bit of texture. The other one I didn't go everywhere with it. Oh, Easton, we'll get it off our mat. But I want a reasonable amount on here, because I like the effect. Little bits on there. So there's a reasonably heavy application there, but a lot lighter here. That's it. Right, I'll put that straight in the water, and I'll just clean my mat up a little bit, or else I'll glue my paper to my mat with it. Alright, now I've got a folded piece of paper. It's only scrap paper. It's what I've been using with embossing powder to get it back in the bottle. So I'm going to put it on one half of there. Then I've got this rusting powder, which is from PaperArtsy. I'll turn it the right way around. And what I do when I get it, I use one of these push pins to make a hole in the top from the outside. Then I take the lid off and remove the seal, because there's a seal under the lid. And then I just store it with the push pin in it. I don't put the seal back because it just sits on my craft desk, and it's much easier just to have it like this. So it comes out quite lightly, but in a bit of a stream, with having just the one hole. So what I tend to do is liberally cover everything. All of the... You can wear a mask. I would recommend wearing a mask, because this is a very fine powder with... I don't know if it's all metal. I don't know the components of it, but I think you'd probably be better if you wore a mask. I'm a bit naughty, I don't. I would say a well-ventilated room, but with no drafts, so it doesn't carry the powder about and you don't inhale it. So I've got a nice lot of the rusting powder on there. This is next bit I've discovered by trial and error. Take the cap off now while you've got it over the project, because the rusting powder collects in the grooves. I'll do it here so you can see, and then you get a blob. And it collects all the way around. So if you don't do it over your project, you'll end up with it losing it and it'll be on your craft mat. Set that aside for the moment. Now, as carefully as you can, lift up your tag. I'll turn it over and give it a good tap. Now, you see what I mean about the powder spreading, and you don't want to inhale it, so a mask is a good idea. There's quite a lot on there. Pop that down there, and then you can gather it up as you would embossing powder and put it back into the bottle. Oops. I'm missing somewhere. Some's gone on the side. This is probably out of focus, but... Right. If you've got any on your craft mat like that, I just put my paper at the edge of my craft mat and brush it back onto my paper, and then do the same again. Get it all into my jar. And that's it. That's about done it. Put your lid back on, and this does go a long, long way. I've used this tons, and I'm probably about halfway down my little bottle. It's really economic. So here we've got our tag. It's covered in the crackle paste, then with the rusting powder, but we've got the tissue underneath. You can see the ridges. Now what we need to do now is to wait overnight until it's completely dried, it's crackled, and then once it is completely dry and it's crackled, we can brush off the excess again onto our paper, put it back in the bottle, and we'll do the next step. So I'll come back tomorrow when it's completely dry. Whilst we've got our rusting powder out, I thought I would just quickly show you something else that I've done. This is double-sided tape. I just got it from the stationers. It's not particularly craft double-sided tape, but it's nice, strong double-sided tape. I've got a length off, as you can see. It's helpful to put two tiny bits of, or small bits of paper, one at either end, onto the sticky part. Gives you something to hang on to with it, without it actually sticking to your hands all the time. So lay it down. Sorry. Excuse me. We get our rusting powder again, and all you're going to do is completely coat it again with your rusting powder. And it will stick because it is double-sided tape and it's adhesive on both sides. Again, do the same with the bottle lid and get it off. Set it aside. Tip the excess off. You see it's stuck. We've got a good coating on there. Pop that up there. And again, we'll gather our powder up and put it back in our bottle. So we've now got our tag, which is drying, and our piece of double-sided tape. That doesn't need to dry. You could do this next step immediately, but we'll do them both together, and then it'll be easier, and you'll see what to do. So again, we'll come back later. Hello, so we're back. This has been left overnight, so it's crackled really, really well. You can see that. I'm going to get my piece of paper again and a clean brush, quite a stiff brush probably, and just, now that it's all completely dry, brush off the excess, because there will be some that hasn't stuck. You can see it on the paper, there's quite a bit. Yeah, that was off my paintbrush, those little bits. So, go down the bottom again, get some bit more. Some of my paintbrushes are a little bit old. Let's get rid of that, I don't want that into my jar of rusting powder. So we can see a little bit of the white of the crackle paste, and then we can see all this lovely crackled area there. So I'll just move that out of the way. I'll put that back into the jar a little bit later. I'll just put it out of there, over there for the moment. So we've got our tag with the crackle paste, and we've got our tape with just the rusting powder. I've got a piece of kitchen roll. I'm going to put them both on there. And then I've got our little bottle of, flip-top bottle of vinegar. If you wanted, you could tape that down just to stop it from curling up. I don't know if I can get to my sellotape at the moment, so it'll be fine as it is. So I'm just going to add vinegar to my tag. I just brush it over all the areas so that it gets onto all the rusting powder. I don't mind that it's getting on the kitchen towel round and about, because it'll just soak it up. Right, going to move that fairly well that way, and I'm going to do the same here. Again, I'm just going to move it about. Be a bit more careful, because this is only held on by the glue on the double-sided tape, the rusting powder, and if you brush it too much, if you brush rather than dab, it can come off. There we are. That's quite a lot. Right, I'll just get my rusting powder again, and I'm just going to put a little bit when it decides to come out in random areas on top of the vinegar. And just move it about, and then it isn't in such obvious lines. As I say, the paper will curl up. I could put something heavy on either end, just a couple of jars just to hold it down. I think I'll put a little bit more rusting powder just on the end here. That's it. And we'll leave that for a few hours till it's completely dried, and it'll start to rust. You can see on the tag some areas have already started to rust where the vinegar has started to evaporate, but it'll take a while. It depends how warm it is. If you're in a warm country, it'll evaporate quite quickly, and you might have to add some more vinegar because the vinegar might evaporate before the process starts. But what you can do is you can keep going back and adding more vinegar till you get the amount of rust that you want. With this tag here, I had it looked superb, and I thought I'll just get it a little bit more rusty. There was quite a grey area here. I added more rust and I actually lost the grey area. Excuse me, which was a shame, but I did put some gilding wax on the top, and that's brought a bit of contrast back. But you've just got to experiment and learn when to stop and step away from it and leave it as it is. So as I say, we'll be a little while the vinegar evaporates, and then I'll show you the results. Right, so we're back and it's dry is the tag. I've given it a couple of coats of vinegar because the first one worked in areas, but I wanted a little bit more rust. I did stop before everything had gone rusty because I actually like, hopefully you'll be able to see this if I get it closer. This is stopped a little bit grey, a little bit steel colour, and I actually like that because it's got a contrast between the rust, which has gone everywhere, and the grey here. So that I'm really happy with that result. You can see the crackling in the corners and round here. There's some nice texture with the rusty tissue that I applied, but then there's also this nice grey area. If I wanted to give it a little bit more depth, I could get just a little sponge and some black archival, which you have to wait while it dries a little bit. It doesn't dry instantly, but that's fine. And I could just edge it a little bit with the black. It just gives it a little bit more depth, I find. And if you wanted to do a little bit on other areas, you could, just to highlight the crackles or anything. Sorry, there's a very, very annoying fly. You can probably hear buzzing about. So we'll just gently do it, and it just gives it a little bit more depth. Doesn't make a great deal of difference, you don't have to do that, but I like to do that. So that's our tag finished. I'm really happy with that. So I'll set that aside. Now we'll come back to the double-sided tape. Now I don't know if you can see, hopefully this will focus. It's again got rusty areas, it's got grey areas, there's quite a lot of interest going on. Again, I gave it a couple of coats of the vinegar with a paintbrush and just sort of swirled it about. So hopefully you'll be able to see when it's against the white. Put it that way. The nice, fairly flat textures, but it's got sort of rust and greys. So I hope you've enjoyed that technique, and I hope you give it a go. Oh, before I forget, this is the other piece of rusty tape. For some reason this rusted more. It is, you can't control it very much, it just does its own thing. This rusted more, but I've highlighted the top, just the texture, with a little bit of gold wax, metallic wax, which brings out the different textures. So there we are, that's a little bit more industrial. I could add wax to this, but I think I'm going to leave it. I actually like it as it is, so I'll leave it. I don't think I'm going to do anything else to it. I like the really dark, grungy, industrial look. So, hope you enjoyed that.